Hi, I'm Christine, and today I'm going to show you how I do or how I use my travel diary, because I travel a lot when we can travel. But even now, although I can't go overseas at the moment, I can still travel around in New South Wales. And so can you. And it's nearly time for school holidays, so I thought this might be an appropriate time to share some stuff about travel diaries. And I'm going to show you some of the work that I've done, and I'll take you through a little bit of information about travel diaries, but I'll show you briefly now. Here there are a couple of different types of travel diaries. So this is a concertina type, and they're readily available, but you can also make them yourself with gluing together pages. You can have a spiral bound one like this. This is something that I've done when I've been at a writer's workshop. And you can have one like this that's actually got a transparent page. That's a Parisian rooftop view. And here it's a fully bound book. So there are a few different types, and then you can also get types that have toned pages in them. I've got one of those somewhere here that I should be able to show you. But let's get on. I'll just put on a little PowerPoint, which will take you through the way that I use my travel diaries. So it's a form of a visual diary or an art journal. And here are the contents of my backpack. Now, everybody probably has a different way of doing this, but I find this works for me. So backpack is easy because then I've got both my arms free and I've got all the gear that I need. It's like being a snail carrying your house on your back. So I have small packs of watercolor and gouache. So I use these Koh-i-Noor sets with the different colors in. You can see how messy they are because I use them all the time. And I use the top part as a sort of palette. I carry around gouache. I usually have a decent sized tube of gouache white because I use quite a bit of that. And then I also carry some tubes of gouache or watercolor. That's a Daniel Smith watercolor in my pack. Obviously sharpener, something to hold the pages down. I have these brushes that carry water in the stem part. A selection of pencils, a gel pen that I use all the time, a white gel pen, that's a black one, a white one, some watercolor pencils, a kneadable rubber. I have a collapsible water container too, although I haven't shown you that here. And I usually carry with me a bottle of water, half full because I don't want anything too heavy, but I can add, I can sort of wash things with that, and also something to drink if I need it. And that's one of my books with a double spiral on the back. That makes it easier for you to sort of hold it out wide, and you can do a panoramic view like I have there. So take your gear wherever you go. It's perfectly easy. I mean, it's absolutely wonderful to sit somewhere with a coffee and do a quick sketch. It's going to mean much more to you than all those hundreds of photographs we end up taking that are hard to retrieve when you want them. Whereas with a book, you can just open it. This is Leon. I was having coffee with a friend. Very pleasant to just sit there. And I did a very quick sketch, nothing fancy. But do take a photo reference. So this is the view and this is the sketch. Now I can turn that into something bigger, and I often do that. I've got a sketch which is a reference, got a photo which is a reference. I can make that into a bigger painting later on. Now, this is an example of something that I started. Now, this is London. That's looking up towards Piccadilly, and it was, well, you can see by the sky here, it was an absolutely freezing day, and it was threatening rain. And I found a place to sort of sit myself and put my little watercolor pack onto a railing where I could rest it, and I managed to get down some of this view. So at the time, I would have got, the dome, some of the buildings. I just would have indicated where the statues were and where the cars were, but I didn't have a lockdown. So later on, I actually went in and worked it. So I worked the statue more, the statue here, put in some of these markings on the road, etc. So yes, don't worry if you can't do it all at once. This is sort of two images in one area. So this is a nice way of capturing the sense of a place. There was an orchard, so I was able to paint quickly some apples on the tree. And so that's what I call a sort of macro image. And then we've got a market scene here, which is much more pulled back, and you can actually just get the sense of what's happening there. So one of my travellers, so I do take groups to France and sometimes to England, and it's an art retreat, and we travel together and we draw together, and we go to galleries, and we have a jolly good time, really, and we eat well. So this was one of the travellers did this drawing, and as she said, so it's a good idea to put a bit of a caption, something that tells you a bit about that day, because you'll be surprised how often you forget exactly when it was. Or I always like to date it. This was the Seine towards the Ile de la Cité, and it's an afternoon on a grey day. But she's captured it beautifully, and there's a bird there, Notre Dame in the distance when it still had its spire. Oh, actually, no. So that would have been after the fire. So this must be another church in the distance. Here, some of us are, so we actually stay in a residence, and we work on our travel drawings later, and we cut things out, we make notes, and we paste things in as well as drawing. Now this is as I showed you very briefly before, this is a concertina style drawing. So it's good for doing something that you might want a kind of panoramic view. And this is a road, this is the road in my street. This is a toned page. So it's so that you can see perhaps here that it's a greyish colour. And it's a sewn book, so you more easily can do a landscape style. And this is gouache that I've used here. And I haven't used any pen on this one, so I've just gone in and painted. Now, this is an interesting little book that I bought some years ago. Betty Churcher, who was an Australian, who was a very well-known presenter on ABC TV on art, and she was, I think she was a gallery director, and she made a series of drawings of famous paintings called Notebooks. Definitely well worth getting, and there's nothing like copying the masters to hone your own expertise. So she's done a few of these in her book, well, actually lots. This is another favourite artist of mine is Jo Bertini, and she goes on scientific expeditions as an artist. And I just love this drawing of the camel. And it's done very quickly, often on the move, and there's one of her paintings. And this is a book that I have, Jo Bertini Field Work, and I think it's lovely. Wendy Sharp's another one who does constantly draw and paint into books on her travels. She does many, many travels. She's a previous Archibald Prize, Portrait Prize winner. She's won many, many awards. And this might be a bit tricky for you to see here, but she captures a scene probably in India here. Just amazing. This is one of mine. So this is another one in London. And I was staying in a place where I had this view. Those of you who know London, you know that there's usually a church spire somewhere. And there's these terrace houses with their satellite dishes and their tiled roofs. Now you can see here that a style that I use a lot, which is to paint first and draw later. So you'll see that the painting, the colour doesn't exactly match up with the drawing, and that's deliberate. Another one of mine, this is done in Paris. In fact, it's done over a number of days. Like I said before, I didn't have time to stand and draw the whole of this corner at Montparnasse, but I was able to, with the aid of a photo reference, to fill in the shutters and the other parts of it over time. But this one was all done in one go. So this was on site, and this was the gates of a chateau close to where we were staying in Tours in the Loire Valley. And you can see here that I've just used a very limited palette, and I've just painted first. And then, so it was these gates that fascinated me. So really they were the main object of my interest. So I just drew those in. So that's the end of the little PowerPoint that I have prepared for you. And now I'll just show you my technique if you're interested in that. So behind me, I have an easel, which I'll bring a little closer. Here's another one of my books with some drawings in local scenes. And this one, so this illustrates, so finding something interesting that you maybe want to keep, you stick that in and put some information. This is one of the light fittings on Victoria Embankment by the Thames, a bit more stuck in, a bit of, I was sitting in a coffee shop looking down on Victoria Station as I waited for a train. So that's a bit of the scenery. So that's what I do when I'm traveling. I'm always got a book with me, and I'm drawing something. Even with when my husband's driving the van, I'll sit in the front seat next to him, and I'll put my paints on the console between us, and I'll be painting the scenery very quickly. So it's kind of like gestural drawing. If you can capture something quite immediately, even if it's not perfect, it'll take you back to that place. You'll be able to smell it. You'll be able to know what the temperature was. You can hear the sounds around you. It's quite evocative, much more so than a photograph is. So here I'm going to just show you. I've got a photograph here because I'm inside and I haven't got the view to show you, but this is the lighthouse at Byron Bay. I live near there. And so I'm just going to try and do a very quick capture for you of that and show you how I work. So with this, so I've got my trusty little paint container, and I'm just going to use a bit of the blues and chuck in a bit of sky. So I work very fast. It's just meant to capture. It's not meant to be perfect. And there is water in this brush, so I can kind of move it around. Just get the blue of the sky in. So that'll probably do for now. as I said, nothing perfect about it, but that colour is there. And if I want to make notes about it for a future painting, I'm going to put a bit of water on that to move it around a bit more. Make a note of, you know, where the light's coming from, whether it's coming from that side or that side, and you know, a few more notes about what the day was like. So just want to get an idea of that, the shape of that lighthouse, but I'm not going to make it perfect. And then with a green, which I've got here too, and I like a kind of a yellowy green. I don't always want a green because this is Australia, and Australia's sort of specialises in dirty greens, not bright English greens. So here I'm just going to get, oh, that's a very bright green, so let's yellow it up a bit. Bit of yellow ochre and just dirty it up a bit. Bit more yellow, I think. So this is what I would do on site. Just get a bit of colour on there. There's a bit of orangey colour in there too. Just here, there's a tree that's in flower. There's a bit of a band of colour there on the lighthouse. There's not much colour on it. So just get that in there. And I might even put in a bit of a bluey colour, just to indicate some of the shadows in here. Right, so that's the beginning part. Now, that's still a bit wet, but I'm going to draw into it anyway. Now, I usually use a gel pen that I mentioned earlier. So I'm going to just, I'm just going to draw in what I see in the shape of the lighthouse. Again, it's not going to be perfect. And part of the joy of this, part of the interest in this, the sort of, is the quirkiness. You know, the fact that it isn't quite right, the fact that it's not a perfect drawing. And you'll be surprised at how many people come around and talk to you. Now, that may not be something that you want to do, but if you allow it to happen, it's kind of fun. People are, generally speaking, very nice about it because they think, oh, you know, I'm impressed, I couldn't be doing that. But occasionally you get some smart Alex who sort of say, I could do that. And you say, yeah, good. I'm glad you can. You know, that's terrific because I like to see other people painting and doing things. So don't ever get too burdened by the whole idea of the fact that you're out there painting and somebody comes and talks to you. Take it as a compliment 90% of the time. And you know what? It's really good in terms of leveling. So children just will come and talk to you. Old people will come and talk to you. It's the sort of time when you think, well, this is great because this child wouldn't normally talk to me. I suppose, I mean, usually they're with their parents, so it's perfectly safe. I've had kids spend, you know, ages with me in a park while their parents have been doing something else. You have to make sure that the parent doesn't leave you with the child. But the children will say things like, I think you left that out there, or, you know, why didn't you do it that colour? It's kind of fun. Now you can see that I'm sort of getting a bit of a drawing happening here. As I said, it's nothing perfect, but it'll capture roughly what you want. And then, you know, you can put in some of these plants here, and it doesn't have to be, as I said, nothing too deliberate. We need to perhaps bring that around here. And because this pen's not going to work so well because I'm actually at the wrong angle for it. And get that weather vane in. And then, you know, you can make it interesting just with the patterning of the various barriers that go around the lighthouse fence, I suppose it is, a sort of fence. And there you just kind of fill in bits. You put that bit around there. Now you can see that the light is there, but you can still see the blue through there. So you can come in and you know, and fill in some of the darks and just leave some of these, some of the bars, makes it more interesting. So I think you can start to see how it works. Now you can actually add a bit more if you want to. So if you felt that the colours are not strong enough, you know, you can kind of bring this in, can put a bit there where the light is, but don't be too fussed about it. And look, you see, I've put the colour of this in the wrong place. Now, I can rectify that if I want to. And it doesn't matter that it's there. It's just a bit of interest. So you can put this in here if you want. You can put a bit more colour in amongst the foliage. I'd make this a bit darker. I think it's a bit light, but sometimes easier if you start light and then you can make it darker later. So a bit of a mixture of greens and blues in here just to give it a bit more life. And you can put a bit of that in there if you want to. So you see, we've got something that's happening. Still early days. There's a bit of a pattern in here, so you could, you know, that's kind of fun. You can pop that in, make it look more interesting. Now you see, because I've got wet, that's wet, it's bleeding into it, but that doesn't really matter. People get upset sometimes when that happens, but it just adds to the immediacy of it, I guess, in my mind, anyway. So there you have the beginning part of a travel drawing, a travel diary drawing. Now you can come in and do all sorts of things with it later. One of the things that I often use is white, and I'll draw over in white. It won't work at the moment because that's way too wet, but I've got lots of drawings where I've used black gel pen and white gel pen as well. But there you are. Now, you know, I would then say where it was, you know, Byron Bay Lighthouse, today's date. I might put in where the sun was coming from. I might say something about, you know, we've just had lunch, So that is a little quick run through my travel diary, the way I use a travel diary. And I'm hoping that in the next year I'll be going on more of the overseas travels. But, you know, if you subscribe to my website, which is Christine Reed Art, and it's READ, Reed, ChristineReedArt.com. You'll get my blogs and you'll see when I'm travelling again, and also all my classes. So I have classes at Lennox Head Arts Collective, or Lennox Arts Collective, I should say, and in Lennox Head. And at the moment, I'm also running some Zoom classes. So I hope this has been of interest, and I hope we meet at some point. Anyway, all the very best to you, and happy drawing.